Have you ever poured your heart and soul into building a new life, a new family, only to find a crack in the very foundation you thought was solid? I'm here to share a story, my story, about love, betrayal, and the unexpected ways life can unfold. It's a true story about infidelity, but it's also about much more than that. It's about rebuilding, rediscovering yourself, and finding strength you never knew you had. My story begins like a modern fairy tale. I met David a few years after my first marriage ended. I was a single mom to a wonderful little boy, and David was a single dad to a sweet daughter. Our meeting felt like fate. We were two people who had been through heartbreak, who understood the complexities of co-parenting, and who were ready to find happiness again. Our kids got along instantly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of completeness. It was like we were finally putting together the pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for years. We dated for 2 years, and they were blissful. We blended our families with laughter, weekend trips, and countless pizza nights. He was everything I thought I wanted. He was attentive, kind, and seemed to adore not just me but my son as well. He called us his complete family. When he proposed on a quiet evening at home, with both kids cheering us on, I didn't hesitate for a second. I truly believed I was getting my second chance at a happily ever after. We got married and bought a house together, a beautiful home where we would raise our children and grow old. For the first year of our marriage, things were perfect. Or so I thought. We settled into a routine. School runs, homework, dinner, and then a little quiet time for us after the kids were in bed. It was domestic, it was comfortable, and I was content. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, the man who promised to stand by me. The idea of infidelity was the furthest thing from my mind. It was a story you heard about happening to other people, not to you, not in your happy new home. The first sign, the first tiny crack, was almost unnoticeable. It was a shift in his routine. David had always been a homebody, but he started working late more often. At first, it was just once a week. He'd say there was a big project, a tight deadline. I believed him. I'd save dinner for him, and when he finally came home tired and apologetic, I'd just be happy to see him. Then it became twice a week. Sometimes he'd have to go in on a Saturday. Just for a few hours, he'd say. I started to feel a little lonely, a little like a single parent again, but I pushed the feeling down. I told myself I was being supportive of his career. The real red flag, the one I couldn't ignore, was his phone. It had always been something he left lying around, but suddenly it was glued to his hand. It was always face down on the table, and he'd quickly snatch it up if I came near. He started taking calls in another room, closing the door behind him. When I asked who it was, he'd give vague answers like just work or a buddy. A knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. It was a sickening feeling, a constant hum of unease that I couldn't shake. I started to feel like a detective in my own home, and I hated it. One evening I decided I couldn't live with the suspicion anymore. It was eating me alive. He was in the shower, and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself not to do it, that it was a violation of trust. But hadn't he already violated my trust with his secrecy? With shaking hands, I picked it up. His password used to be our anniversary, but it didn't work. I tried his daughter's birthday. It opened. What I found shattered my world into a million pieces. There were messages, not from one woman, but several. It wasn't just a physical affair. It was a web of emotional connections he was building with other people. He was telling them things he no longer told me, sharing jokes, making plans. The most painful part was reading messages from one woman in particular. She was a colleague. He was telling her about his unhappy marriage, how he felt trapped. He described me as demanding and cold. The words on the screen didn't just break my heart. They completely distorted my reality. The happy family I thought we were building was a lie. He wasn't working late. He was living a double life. I confronted him that night. I didn't scream or cry, not at first. I was in a state of shock, a cold, numb calm washing over me. I simply showed him the phone. The color drained from his face. There was no denial, no grand defense. He just crumbled. He admitted everything. The late nights, the secret calls, the lies. He said he didn't know why he did it, that he loved me but felt overwhelmed. He talked about the pressure of a blended family, the financial stress, but it all sounded like hollow excuses. How could he love me and do this? How could he stand in our home, with our children sleeping down the hall, and lie to my face day after day? The days that followed were a blur of pain. We tried counseling. I wanted to believe we could fix it, for the kids, for the life we had built. But in those sessions, I saw the truth.
He wasn't sorry for what he did, he was sorry he got caught.
He wasn't willing to do the hard work of rebuilding trust.
He just wanted things to go back to the way they were, to sweep the betrayal under the rug.
I realized that the man I married didn't really exist. He was a character he had created, and I had fallen in love with a fantasy. The decision to leave was the hardest one I've ever had to make. It meant dismantling the life I had so carefully constructed. It meant explaining to my son that our family was changing again. It meant facing the world as a single mom for the second time. There were moments of overwhelming fear and doubt. Could I do this on my own? Was I making a huge mistake? The guilt was immense, not just for my son, but for his daughter too, who I had come to love as my own. But in the midst of all that pain, something incredible happened. I started to find myself again. Without the constant anxiety of his betrayal hanging over me, I could finally breathe. I focused on my son, on creating a stable, loving home just for the two of us. I reconnected with old friends who I had drifted away from during my marriage. I poured my energy into my work and my hobbies. Slowly but surely, the woman I was before David, the strong, independent woman who had raised a child on her own, started to re-emerge. I learned that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you get back up. The end of my marriage felt like a failure, but it was actually a liberation. It freed me from a lie and gave me the chance to build a life based on truth and self-respect. I learned that my happiness cannot be dependent on someone else. It has to come from within. I also learned the importance of listening to my intuition. That little voice that told me something was wrong, it was right. And I will never ignore it again. It's been a few years now. My son and I are thriving. Our little home is filled with peace and laughter. I'm not bitter or cynical about love. In fact, I'm more hopeful than ever, because now I know what I deserve. I deserve honesty, respect, and a partner who chooses me every single day, not just when it's convenient. Infidelity is a devastating experience, and if you're going through it, please know you're not alone. It feels like the end of the world, but it can also be the beginning of a new one. A world where you are the architect of your own happiness. My story doesn't have the fairy tale ending I once dreamed of, but it has something better, a real one. It's a story of resilience, of a mother's love, and of the incredible power we all have to heal and start over. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories about navigating life's challenges, please consider subscribing to my channel. Remember, you are stronger than you think.